We were on the way home last night, and Tess had asked me, are you guys talking about something different? I was like, oh no, we don't need to. I think it's what we're talking about is very timely, and no, we did not change what the message was going to be because of what was happening. We planned this in November of last year, and I think that's just how God works. And so here's the reality: we're all busy. Right? We all have to-do lists that keep growing, and life can feel overwhelming, not just in seasons, but often every day. And then here's the crazy part. You start to follow Jesus, and Jesus invites you to do even more. And so how can you actually care for other people the way that Jesus is asking us to when you're barely managing yourself? And is there a secret to juggling it all? And is it possible to follow and live out these ancient teachings in today's world? If you're taking notes, the title of our message today is, I Ain't Got Time for That. I ain't got time for that. And I'm from the South, so ain't is a word. How many of you remember the movie Pinocchio? If you remember it and you were to think about it, take a step back and think about the movie, even though it's a kid's movie, I think it's actually pretty dark, right? You have evil puppeteers, boys turning into donkeys, and a puppet that wants to be real. And so in the movie, Pinocchio's guide is his conscience, which is embodied by a cricket in a tuxedo. And it sounds odd, but if you have kids, you get it. Because your kids are like a walking conscience. They're like that cricket calling you out when your actions don't match your values. I think many times kids insist that we help someone, whether it's someone experiencing homelessness, a stray dog, someone with a flat tire, or maybe those that they are seeing be affected by wildfires like we've seen over the last several days. And we calmly explain to our kids, we just don't have time for that. We don't have time to go here and then go here and do that, or we don't have enough ourselves to be able to give them what they need, and all of those things that we say calmly to our kids, they sound logical to us, but if we were to put ourselves in our kids' perspective, I think honestly it kind of sounds confusing and maybe a little bit absurd to them, because I think it's often easy for us to dismiss kids as naive, thinking that they don't get how complicated life is. But maybe it's not as complicated as we make it. Maybe we use complexity as an excuse to avoid discomfort. See, kids, like Pinocchio's cricket, they call out our excuses and remind us of the gap that often exists between what we say and what we do. And if you're taking notes, you can write this down. We all need the occasional real-time reminder to be better humans, and God is gracious enough to give them to you. We all need real-time reminders to be better humans, and God is gracious enough to give them to you. I wonder if you've ever had something unexpectedly remind you that you've lost touch with what matters most to you in life. Maybe it was a kid's question. Maybe it was something that you read in a book. Maybe it was a moment in a movie or lyrics to a song that you heard. But I just believe that God can use anything and everything to get your attention. And ancient mystics, they believed that everything was God whispering to them. And if that's the case, a question for us is, are you listening? Jesus often used parables to wake up his followers' consciences, and these short, inventive stories help people see their lives from a fresh perspective, one that maybe they weren't willing to look at it from. And they were meant to be like a cricket on your shoulder or a kid in your car confronting the self-centered parts of you that you would rather ignore. In this series, we're focusing on one story, the Good Samaritan, found in the book of Luke in chapter 10. And last week, we discussed how hard it is for us to love a neighbor that we don't even notice. And this week, we want to ask the question, why don't we notice? Right? We're not intentionally ignoring people. Maybe we are. But it's happening. And we want to explore why. And here's the story, right? The story that Jesus tells is that there was a man traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked. And while he's lying hurt on the side of the road, there was a priest that came by, and the priest just kept walking, didn't stop to see if the man was okay. And then Jesus says in the story that a temple assistant walks by and he pauses to see, but he also crosses to the other side of the road and he keeps going. And then there's a Samaritan, someone that often the religious people despise, that thought differently than them, believed differently than them, lived differently than them, who chose to stop and not just stop and care for the man, but he went above and beyond, gave him his own donkey, took him to an inn. And when we say took him to an inn, he walked miles to get him to an inn, paid for his stay, and said, hey, if the bill gets any higher, let me know, and I'll pay for that too. And so the Samaritan stops for the man, and he goes above and beyond. And Jesus essentially says to the person he's telling this story to, who's asking him, who is my neighbor? How should I treat those around me? How should I live with those around me? And Jesus says, if you are like the Good Samaritan, you will live a full life. And he says, now go. I need you to go and do the same that this Samaritan has done in this story. And so the first guy, priest, walks by without stopping. The second, a temple assistant, comes closer but doesn't help. Why? Why don't they help? I think motivation is messy and no one acts for just one reason, but here a major factor seems to be time. Both men, as Jewish religious figures, were likely focused on honoring laws about ceremonial purity, especially regarding sickness and death. And we see a picture of what they're trying to follow. Numbers 19, verses 11 through 16. This is what it says. All those who touch a dead human body will be ceremonially unclean for 7 days. They must purify themselves on the third and 7th days with the water of purification. Then they will be purified. But if they do not do this on the 3rd and 7th days, they will continue to be unclean even after the 7th day. All those who touch a dead body and do not purify themselves in the proper way defile the Lord's tabernacle, and they will be cut off from the community of Israel. Since the water of purification was not sprinkled on them, their defilement continues. Verse 14, this is the ritual law that applies when someone dies inside a tent. All those who enter that tent and those who were inside when the death occurred will be ceremonially unclean for 7 days. Any open container in the tent that was not covered with a lid is also defiled. And if someone in an open field touches the corpse of someone who was killed with a sword or who died a natural death, or if someone touches a human bone or a grave, that person will be defiled for 7 days. And so getting too close to a dead man meant 7 days of contamination, which would completely disrupt their routine. And so if he was alive, it would also still take a huge amount of time to care for them. Think about everything that the Samaritan did. Used his resources, gave up his donkey, walked miles to an inn, cared for the man, paid for ongoing care, and promised to return. That cost him time, money, resources, and maybe even relationships. He did all of this without cell phones. He couldn't even explain why he was late. Imagine if he was married, right? And he finally gets to where he was going, and his wife says, really? 6 days later? Because you got to think about it. That's what it was like in that context, right? And he's like, well, I know I'm 6 days late, but there was a guy. Could you imagine the look on his wife's face? But here's what we have to understand. Helping someone doesn't just inconvenience you, but it impacts everything and everyone around you. The Samaritan didn't just go the extra mile, he kept going. And Jesus models this for us too. Throughout the Gospels, many of Jesus' healings happened when he was interrupted on his way somewhere else. And even with only 3 years to complete his mission, Jesus made time for people, letting them interrupt his agenda. And if you're taking notes, you write this down, because for Jesus, loving others wasn't something you did when it was convenient. It was something you prepared your soul for and scheduled to be inconvenienced by. And I don't know about you, but this is hard for me. I don't think I have much free time, right? Should I not pick up my son from school? Should I miss work? Should I bail on friends? I tell myself, this person doesn't want my help. Someone else will stop, someone with more time or someone better suited to serve them. And whatever they need, it won't take just 5 minutes. It'll probably be more like 30, right? You probably have people in your life that if you start a conversation with them, it's not going to be short, right? You know what I'm talking about? How many of you got those people? And so when we were pastoring a church in New York City, there was a guy in our community. I love him. He was that guy. And in a city like New York, as big as it is, you just run into people all the time. And so I remember walking home, getting off the subway, and I'm walking home to our apartment, and I see him in the distance about a couple blocks away, and he's walking towards me, I'm walking towards him, and I got a decision to make. Because I'm like, man, if he stops me, it's not gonna be 5 minutes. It's gonna be 30 minutes, and I don't have 30 minutes. At least that's what we tell ourselves, right? And so I decided to do the Jesus thing, and I walked towards him. I kept walking towards him, and I gave him 30 minutes of my time. That's not what I did. I went the other way. I turned around, and I said, okay, I can't do that today, God, right? Some of you are judging me, but I just think it's important to be honest and vulnerable. I'm just like you. And I think we have moments where we tell ourselves we don't have time. But I don't think it's that we don't have time. I think it's we haven't prepared. We haven't created time. We haven't made time, right? And I think what's happened is we say things like, you know what, I don't have time, but you know what, I'll help later when life slows down. Here's the problem with later. Later never comes. And some of you are still waiting on later 2 years later. It never will come, right? And how many things have you promised to do but never got to? We've gotten really good at convincing ourselves with 3 powerful lies that we're choosing to believe, right? One of those lies is it's just a busy season. I'm sorry. It's been a busy season for you for the last 5 years. My gosh. Has the thought ever crossed your mind that it's just gonna be a busy season and you gotta figure out how these things that you say matter to you fit into your life if they matter? Right? The other lie that we believe is, well, you know, I'll change after I hit this goal. Once I get this promotion, then I'll be able to do all these things that I want to do that I say matter to me. Can I tell you, if you get that promotion, you're going to have less time. Right? Think about that. Right? Oh, you know, well, once I get married, we'll do those things together. No, because now it's not just your calendar. You got other people who have things that they want to do too. You know, once we have kids, then we'll prioritize church. Good luck, right? But we say those things and we believe that, right? The other lie that we believe is everybody lives this way. Well, everyone else is doing it. And we use that as an excuse. And here's the reality. The real question is not whether you have time, but it's whether you're making time for what truly matters to you. And if you're like me, you wish for more time, but no one is making more time. You have the same 24 hours as Jesus. And your to-do list probably isn't as critical as saving the entire world from their sin. And often what we blame on lack of ability is really an issue of priority. And if you're taking notes, here's our big idea today. What we say we don't have time for is often something we refuse to make time for. What we say we don't have time for is often something we refuse to make time for. A mentor of mine once told me, he says, you know what? You got to stop saying you don't have time because it's not true. And he said, that's a lie that's actually rooted in a victim mentality. He said, you're in charge of your story. You're in charge of your time. Everything is a choice. Instead, what you need to say is, I won't make time for that because it's not a priority. That might be uncomfortable to admit, right? That your choices are that way, right? I won't listen to my spouse. I won't go to the gym. I won't slow down. I won't prioritize faith, therapy, or serving others. But owning your decisions might actually help you make better ones. And I think that's the point of the cricket in the tuxedo. And if you're taking notes, you can write this down. Tell your time where to go. You can either design your schedule or be dominated by it. Both are a choice. You got to tell your time where to go. You can either design how you're going to use your time, or you're going to be dominated by feeling like you don't have any of it. And admitting this is hard, right? Because if someone helps you organize your schedule more efficiently, you lose the excuse of being too busy, right? Most of us don't want others seeing how we waste our time. Also, nobody who lives or works with you is thinking, you seem pretty stressed, scattered, uneasy, impatient, and overwhelmed. What's your secret? I'm hoping to feel the same way. Right, and so here's my confession. It's hard for me to make time for people because I love to get things done. Love to get things done. And can I tell you, when you have a 2-year-old, that is hard. Right? It is so hard. But here's something that I'm realizing is that relationships, even with your kids, are terribly inefficient. But ironically, they're the most worthwhile investment. And this isn't just a good idea, it's what God tells us to do if we want to live a full life. 1 John 3:17, this is what it says. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. Many of us think, I would die for the people that I love. And that's great, but would you leave work early? Would you push that meeting back? Would you cut the trip early? Would you close the laptop for 10 minutes? Would you be honest that if you don't get that done, the world's not going to fall apart tomorrow? You know, this week has been just kind of chaotic, and honestly chaotic in the best way. And but I think sometimes people look at what we've been doing this week and they say, well, that's your job. There's an element to that that's true. But nothing else with my job stops. And nothing else with my team's job stops. It's just we figure out how to do all of this at the same time. And so, like some of you come in on Sunday hoping that maybe I have something that would be useful for you to hear. Because of everything that we've been doing, that doesn't stop. And so now I got to find time when I'm at home to do these things. And so my son, talk about interruption. My gosh, kids, they should just put a picture of a little kid next to the word interruption in the dictionary. But the reality is trying to get work done at home. And, I'm trying to type, and he does this thing where he's telling us, no, you're home. We're not working. So he'll come and he'll just push our laptop closed. That's what he does. He just comes and shoves it on your fingers. And, after once or twice, it's like, Zion, stop, right? That's our first response. Zion, stop. I gotta work. And really, what he's saying is, don't you see me? Don't you notice me? You say you love me, but you don't even see me right now. Because what I'm feeling is that work is more important than me. What you're typing is more important than me. And man, it's so hard to take a step back and say, you know what? I can close this for 10 minutes. I can close this for 15 minutes because as much as I love you guys, gosh, I'm never gonna love you as much as I love my son. I hate to admit that to you. But it's just reality. And so we gotta be interruptible, right? Jesus understood something that we often miss. Nothing is more important than caring for others, even when it's inconvenient. And so how do we do that? I wanna give you 3 things really quick before we get out of here today. The first thing is this: you gotta schedule your non-negotiables first. Schedule non-negotiables first. Identify what's most important to you and build your schedule around it, right? Have you clearly stated your family's priorities? For example, maybe for you, Sundays are for church. That's a priority for us. We're gonna be in church, right? The second thing is minimize mindless time wasters. Cut back on activities like scrolling TikTok. And some of you are like, man, I hope that government ban stays because that'll really help me to not really have it active, right? These things aren't bad, but I wonder if the things that you're wasting your time on mindlessly, I wonder if they're distracting you from better things. And so what could you say no to in order to say yes to people and relationships, and most importantly, your neighbors? The third thing, we've talked about it, be interruptible. You have to adopt a mindset that welcomes interruptions, that welcomes someone to just walk through the door and stop you in your tracks and what you're doing. There's an author that he says, love and hurry are not compatible. And so do you leave space in your schedule for life's unexpected moments? Right? Those are big picture steps to work on. And like, I want to give you a glimpse of this and just the power of this. But here's our challenge this week. Our challenge is this. If you're taking notes, you write this down. I want to challenge you to intentionally inconvenience yourself at least once a day this week for someone you don't feel like serving. And man, I couldn't think of a better time to do it. Couldn't think of a better time to do it. You guys are hearing this. We didn't change the message today because of what's happening. That's just how God works. Isn't that crazy? It's like he knew. He knew, man, I need a church in Burbank to understand the importance of being a part of inconveniencing themselves to serve and care for those that are in need. And so we're making it super easy for you. We're going to open up our building. We're here all week. We're here this afternoon. Right? Some of you are like, well, I was going to watch the football game. Well, here's the thing. If you're born and raised in LA, you've been here for a long time, can I just break it to you? The Chargers lost. They're done. And the Rams, they play tomorrow. Oh my gosh. You know what that means? None of the teams that play today matter. 1 o'clock, we're here, 2 U-Hauls. Right? Might be inconvenient, but man, does it matter. And for all the parents in the room and those that are joining us online today, can I tell you that you don't just have a cricket calling you out, you got a cricket watching you. Not telling you what to do, but observing how you treat others and how you prioritize time. Loving your neighbors often starts with those under your roof. The time you spend with them is never wasted. Imagine if your neighbors and kids saw you as someone with an open door, someone who prioritizes time for others, not because you're free, but because neighboring is what you say matters to you most, right? And we've experienced this week, right? Zion hasn't had school, and so we woke up on Wednesday trying to figure out and make sense of what was happening, and we made the decision to say, you know what, we're going to open up the building, we're going to let people bring stuff, and we'll figure out the rest later. And so because he's not in school, he's along for the ride, right? And so the next day, on Thursday, we're coming back and we're doing the same thing. And he looks at us and he goes, am I going to school? And we're like, no, you're not going to school. Because even though his school is here, we've like been able to separate that idea for him. And he goes, am I going to school? No, but we are going to church. And, you know, we told him we're going to church because we're going to try to help people. And because we want to explain to him why we're going there. We don't want you to just understand, like just know that we're going to church because that's what we're doing. No, we're going to church for a purpose. The same way you go to school on certain days, even though it's at the church. And so here's how this plays out. And here's how you know they're observing. Yesterday, we're coming back yesterday, and we're getting them ready. He goes, am I going to school? We're like, no, you're not going to school today. It's Saturday. And we said, but we did say we're going to church. And this is what he says. He says, we're going to help people. Now, they're watching and observing. And my prayer is that, man, that seeds are being planted in him. He ain't helping, I'll tell you that. He might be bringing a little cute joy to some people that are here, but he ain't really helping. But I think my prayer is that seeds are being planted in him that will bear fruit, that when he's older, when he sees people in need, he will have the mindfulness to know that, man, I remember how my family used their time. And it was in times like this where they showed up, even when it was inconvenient. And man, can I tell you, it has not been convenient at all. I'm exhausted. I am tired, but I've never been more emotionally full. My heart's never been full. My soul's never been more refreshed. And it just brings me so much joy to see what's happening in our community when people are literally trying to figure out how to make sense of their life. And to see him be a part of it and to see what's happening, I think is everything. And so we were at dinner last night after we've been here all day, and he fell asleep at dinner. And and he made bedtime so easy. That's the other thing is like, man, he's so tired. It's amazing. But man, I just love that he gets to be around it. He gets to see it. He gets to hear it. He gets to feel it, and that it makes a difference.
South Hills Church, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for watching our service online. Whether you're watching it for the first time or you're watching it again because you enjoyed the service so much from the weekend, I'd like to take a moment and dive into our giving. Every week we give people the opportunity to give back and give to the local church so that God can continue to bless your lives and bless your finances. Here at South Hills, we believe that everything comes from God. We believe that He's the one that chose us and brought us into this world, gave us our gifts and talents and abilities. And I just want you to know that when we give, we are giving back what God has already given to us. If you've ever seen any of our envelopes at a South Hills campus, you'll see on there that it says, every week at South Hills, your generosity is giving people the opportunity to live a better story. And there's a scripture on there in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21 that says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So I want to encourage you today to click down below and set up your giving, whether it's for the first time or whether you're doing reoccurring giving. We have 4 ways to give here at South Hills. 1, you can do it in person at any of our campuses through an envelope. Or 2, you can actually text any amount that you would like to 84321. And the 3rd way is to download our Church Center app. I encourage you to do this one because the Church Center app gives you opportunity to stay connected with our church and your campuses. It's a great tool and resource for you to know what's going on. And the 4th way to give is to give online. You can go to southhills.org/give and you can set up your giving there. Whether you're a guest of our church or whether you are a member of our church, or whether you simply just like to watch our services, I encourage you to trust God with your finances so that He can bless and anoint your finances, and you can be trusting God in this journey of living life to the fullest. I love you, and thank you for watching our online service today.